Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of The Deep Cut here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I'm your host, John Rocha, and I'm extremely excited to welcome this gentleman to the show today. You guys are in for an incredible treat. This is a gentleman who's come into my radar over the last few years as I've started watching more and more of the great British television that's come around over the last few years, and also some of the great British movies that have dropped as well. Plus, having a girlfriend who's an Anglophile, which I've spoken to many of you about, I have been schooled on this gentleman's career and this gentleman's work for quite some time. He is very well known for his work as Sidney Chambers in Grantchester and Tommy Lee Royce in Happy Valley. That's a personal favorite of mine. But you also might have seen him in Little Women, which he just did with Greta Gerwig, and Education back then with Carey Mulligan. Rush, Ron Howard's Rush, which is a fantastic film with Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl. Mr. Turner, Timothy Spall, a great work there from Mike Leigh. War and Peace, he was in the War and Peace miniseries with Lily James. Flatliners, the remake that was done here recently. McMafia is one that he really has a lot of love for, and The Trials of Christine Keeler. But today he is here to talk to us about his new film. It's called Mr. Jones. It's available now on digital for you to enjoy, and it's on demand on July 3rd. He plays Gareth Jones, real-life journalist Gareth Jones, in this incredible new movie. It's directed by Agnieszka Holland. I hope I said that right. He'll correct me if I haven't. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Deep Cut, James Norton. How are you, James?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, John. I appreciate it. That's an amazing introduction. That's my whole career in about 20 seconds.
Well, I mean, I've been like, Happy Valley was my first intro into you on Netflix here in the States. And my girlfriend was like, you got to see this show. You got to see the show. And my first exposure to James Norton was, I hate you, Tommy Lee Royce. I hate you, James Norton. And then she's like, well, you got to see Grantchester. You got to see this other side of him. And so exploring your career, when this movie popped up, which is a true life tale about this journalist who exposed or tried to expose what Stalin was doing there in Russia, me being a massive fan of history, I was so dialed into watching this movie and seeing your performance. Talk to me about how this all came about for you, how you got first exposed to this story, and how you came on to the project.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago now. It's funny because I guess what with the current climate and other factors, this film we actually made this early 2018. So it's been a long process. So it kind of arrived on my radar, I think mid 2017. Yeah, it was, do you know, embarrassingly, and I've said this a few times now in a few interviews, I didn't know anything about Gareth Jones, which was a surprise and a kind of embarrassing considering his contribution to history, particularly in this country. You know, he's Welsh, so it's close to home. It was a shock, and I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that he tragically died very young and didn't really wasn't allowed to leave his mark the way he would have done had he lived.
Right.
Also, equally embarrassing, I had very little knowledge of the Holodomor. Whilst I knew a lot about the Holocaust from school and history, I knew hardly anything about the Ukrainian famine in the 30s. So reading the script was a shock. You know, it was like that in itself as an experience was kind of a real eye-opener. And I had to kind of put the script down and then go to the sort of Wikipedia and just try and educate myself about this period of history. And then Agnieszka Holland, who I was aware of, I loved Secret Garden, and I'd seen a couple of her movies, but I wasn't fully educated on her kind of greatness. That was obviously a very exciting process. The two then marrying together, the excitement of telling a story which not only was a brilliant script, but also had a real social conscience and felt like it really needed to be told, alongside this extraordinary director who, she's fearsome and she's been around for some years, but you would never know. She's got this incredible energy, but obviously this incredible catalogue of work. So it was a very exciting moment when I realized, that this particular script, Andrea did a brilliant job on the writing. Agnieszka, this extraordinary auteur, old school Polish kind of great of cinema, and this story, which, as I say, it was a very important story to tell.
Yeah, and this is a territory that Agnieszka has traveled to a few times before. She's done 3 separate films that dealt with World War II, and I was reading some quotes from her and doing research for this interview, and she said the last thing she wanted was to do another movie about World War II, but there was something about this story, about Gareth Jones, wanting to expose this, about him being kind of lost to history, except for the really deep history buffs who know him. She wanted to kind of expose this story and show this story to people. And you say you got on this project in 2017 and shot in 2018. It's incredibly prescient for what's going on now, or topical, I guess now, currently topical, prescient back then for what we're experiencing now, this idea of fake news or silencing journalists who are trying to expose totalitarian regimes and the things that they're doing. Do you feel that, like, do you take a moment sometimes during these press tours for this film and just kind of absorb the fact that how incredibly prescient this film was at the time you were making?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, depressingly so. Agnieszka said that to me many times. I never wanted to make this movie, and I did this. I told this, versions of this story, and I was in this world many times before. And like actors, I think she wants always to kind of explore new areas and teach. She's all about education, educating herself, and she's just by nature an incredibly inquisitive person. But she's also a woman of incredible integrity and has. She's so much more than a director. I realized that when I was in Poland. She has this. She's a real sort of. She really represents the kind of progressive left in that country, and more than ever right now with their government, who, like a lot of the world, are sliding more and more into the kind of populist right, which is kind of a scary time for countries like Poland and ours and yours. So she like everyone, I think, wants to use her work as a way of mobilizing and educating. And this, I guess, was a perfect opportunity. I guess it differed from Europa and In Darkness and other movies because it focused on a journalist. And I think, right now, that in itself is something we need to celebrate. I mean, the press, as you say, is such a tricky time to know how to navigate the world of fake media and the manipulation of truth to prop up totalitarian regimes. So I think she saw it as an undeniable opportunity, an unmissable opportunity to celebrate journalists, to encourage future generations of young investigative journalists to go out there. And not that I should ever expect the people, the young aspiring Gareth to pay the price he did.
Right.
Obviously, unfortunately, there are many. Daphne Galizia Kuriana, the Maltese journalist who, not long before we shot this film, was killed in Malta, exposing the corruption there. And it happens all too often. So, I think it was interesting. Brexit had happened not long before. I think it was about a year and a half before. Yeah. Poland was in its own mess. Trump had been elected.
Right.
And Agnieszka loves a meaty conversation about so it was very unnerving to notice how we were in this cycle in the 1930s suddenly seemed to be repeating themselves. Right. It was also a privilege because every night we'd go and we'd sit over a bottle of vodka and we'd chew over this, the state of the world, and Agnieszka was the perfect person to learn from and have those conversations with. So it was very privileged, but also, as you say, it was unnerving.
Yeah. Well, you're a studious guy from the research I did on you, and you studied. A book is not unfamiliar to you. You enjoy studying. You got, was it a degree in theology at Cambridge or philosophy in Cambridge? Like all of that kind of leads to the kind of person that you are, your natural nature. So I was going to ask you what was different in preparing for this role than say any other role that you've done, but it seems like that's you just answered that by having these kinds of extensive philosophical conversations with Agnieszka kept you in the vibe of this character and the importance of the movie.
Yeah, so the books, most of which I embarrassingly haven't read behind me, but tactically, obviously, very, positioned, very self-conscious.
Very well done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the conversations we had with Agnieszka were always just. The film was a great stepping stone into, she loves nothing more than kind of getting her teeth into a real debate. And actually, I have to say, often it ended in fairly heated argument. She was sometimes with me, but particularly, she really loved to provoke me when it came to gender politics, and I would always take the bait. But with her crew and her kind of producers, she's just, not that she was ever on the wrong side of the argument, but she just loves nothing more. She's a fantastic conversationalist. So that side, that one, whilst working in the weird parts of, the very remote parts of northern Ukraine, was less about Gareth, as in more about kind of what was going on in the world. The preparation, like every job, and particularly when you play a person from history, we had a responsibility to honor his memory, and there is enough on Gareth out there, even though he's not that well known. There is enough there's a few books behind me, which most of them I read, which gave us a kind of stepping stone. And there's an amazing resource on the internet, a website dedicated to him and his life, put together by his family. And that was incredibly important, to try and find the person alongside the facts. But it was, it wasn't very different from other roles I've played when I've played a person from history, honoring their memory, using the academia and the literature and the books and the various kind of accounts from people who were living at the same time, and then discarding all that and essentially finding our Gareth, which Agnieszka and I did. And that's when as a director, she just shone, because she's so bright and so opinionated, but she's also just so sensitive, and just her relationship, with just human beings. It's her empathy, and so we were able to find little bits of information about him. I've said this a few times, but one letter described him as being a real boyish kind of.
Right. The one from an ant. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was very useful, and there were other kind of other sort of sides to it, which I guess were less related to the academic research and more just the kind of the personal. We're not in the world of mimicry. So at the end of the day, we found our Gareth, and I hope that we did him justice, and I think the family were pleased, at least the ones who remembered him. Yeah, it's always a challenge. You always have the kind of, and at the end of the day, you have the memory of him looking down, and you hope that of everyone who's watched the movie, critics and audience, you hope that Gareth Jones is happy.
Yeah, I hope so, and I would think so. I mean, regardless of what the review, most reviews have been really good. There have been some dissenting reviews, but overall, you're getting raves for your performance, and you're bringing Gareth Jones to life in the way that you do in the movie, and the work shows, man. And the thing, when you're watching the different things that you do, and having been a former actor myself, you're watching for certain things in the eyes and certain things in the face, right? It's about the listening moments that really show you how much work an actor has prepared for showing the inner workings that are going on when they're listening to every word that is going on in a scene. And I think you really capture that, and it helps you to immediately like Gareth, because Gareth is a bit of a battering ram when he gets his teeth into something throughout the movie. And maybe that's a little bit Agnieszka, as you say, maybe she was influenced to do this movie because she saw some of herself in Gareth, as you say. She likes to get into these argumentative exchanges at times. Maybe she sensed that with this character of Gareth, who was just like, no, you have to do these things. We have to expose this stuff. Did you sense that as you were creating the character as well?
I think you're absolutely right. Yes, Agnieszka is someone who went to prison for her beliefs. She was in prison I think it was towards the end of the Soviet Union, and she was essentially after imprisonment she was exiled to Paris and wasn't allowed back. And she had a young daughter and her husband who were in Poland at the time, and so she paid huge sacrifices, huge prices in the fight for freedom of speech and freedom of thought, so I think she probably did see a lot of herself in Gareth, and I think that's probably why it was an unmissable opportunity for her. It's funny because when you read the script, and sometimes the temptation is to, especially when you're honoring a person of Gareth's sort of how a man of such integrity and principle, you can often forget the fact that you can sort of filter it through a very sort of heroic the temptation is to make it this kind of this story honoring this man's memory, and actually part of the reason why he was able to take the risks he did was because he was naive, and and he was an adrenaline junkie, and you know, he never fell in love, because I don't know why, but I assume it was because every single time and he says this in his diaries, you know, every single time I stay still, I just need to be on the road. I'm just a constant image. And Agnieszka definitely captured that in the film. She those sequences in between sort of chapters where you have that sense of motion and it's trains, and she borrows the kind of old Soviet cinema. That was definitely kind of tapping into Gareth's own inner rhythm. So I think probably Agnieszka did identify with that, and has a similar momentum, a similar rhythm, and a similar kind of dogged pursuit of truth and what is right, and following that kind of greater good.
Yeah. So it seemed like you're not only channeling Gareth, you were also channeling a little bit at Agnieszka's thoughts about the character, as well as you were creating your own version of it. So it seemed like almost a holy trinity of people coming together.
Oh man, I wish I could sort of take you to the kind of moments in Ukraine, because we were filming in like these really remote villages, and it was so cold, and the snow got to our waist, and it was, I mean, it genuinely was a real kind of challenge to get the filming done, because we were coincided with this weather front, beast from the east, which I don't know if you guys got over in the States, but Western Europe was kind of basically kind of taken. It completely sat over most of Western Europe for a good few months, a good few weeks. And Agnieszka, just the way she led us, the way she would, not very tall, but she would charge through the snow, right. And never let anything hinder her. And when we were, you may have heard this in other interviews, but when we were sitting, I remember huddled together in these tents, she'd start singing these songs, and the whole crew would start singing with her. And she genuinely is this incredible leader and an inspirational lady. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've worked with some interesting directors, but it sounds like this she got kind of inside you a little bit, and kind of has left you with a experience you'll never forget.
Yeah, she definitely has. She definitely is a very special lady. I'm kind of in awe of her. I'm terrified of her as well. And you're wrong. Like she's totally, you know, she's formidable. But she's incredibly warm. That's what I love about her, is that she, you know, she would often come up to me and like tick me off for something, but then at the same time she'd come and she'd kind of give me a hug, which would usually come to somewhere around my waist, like above my waist, because again I'm quite tall and she's not. But there was always a real warmth there, where she was real. So for me, I guess that's, you know, she inspired me, but also she allowed me to trust her and love her, and that's the perfect thing a director can do, because you respect them enough to do what they say and follow them into battle anywhere, but you also love them enough to give them your whole kind of, you know, inner soul. So yeah, she's the real deal.
Yeah, and it must have checked some boxes for you personally too. I mean, you have two parents who are teachers, your sister is a doctor, so I'm sure the three of you, or the four of you, when you get together, there are some interestingly deep conversations about philosophical things in the world. So certainly Agnieszka must have fit right in your mind to that pattern and rhythm you've already developed with your own family.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. My sister's usually the one who's like standing on the sidelines going, "Shut up," because she knows that we get into certain conversations, it always ends in tears, and one of us will end up storming out of the room. She's the kind of more calm one of the four of us. So, but yeah, no, certainly I've definitely grown up in a household, particularly my mum and I. We love a debate, you know, love chewing over a conversation. So yeah.
You talk about where Agnieszka came. Like, this is an interesting point to bring up. Gareth was a smaller guy than you, or a shorter guy than you, a little more nebbish, and this must have been a distinctly unique challenge for you to bring that energy into the body of yours that has been used in certain ways, you know, as a strong battering ram, as a, you know, kind of a more vulnerable priest, like you play in Grantchester. Those interesting thing, you know, we've seen you without your shirt off in a number of things, so it must have been interesting to see yourself kind of as an actor go, okay, now how do I bring this energy through this body, right?
Yeah, it's funny. That's where you lean into the sort of descriptions, the few descriptions we had of him. Mm-hmm. And someone asked me recently, it was a kind of conversation more about the kind of craft of acting and what my starting point is. And it's funny, a lot of actors really, you know, particularly in theatre, there's a lot, and I get it more and more, is a lot of the kind of the jumping off the diving board is the physicality, and often to like little details like the shoes, you know, what shoes you wear. Gareth, for me, one of the very important props which I was given early on was his notebook and his pencil, because a lot of accounts, fellow journalists who were in Moscow at the same time described him as always like furiously writing in his book, almost, I mean, offensively so. You know, he'd be at a party, and we have that scene when he's with Peter Sarsgaard's party. Peter's there completely naked, you know, entertaining having this amazing kind of evening of entertainment, and Gareth's in the middle of it, rejecting all the drugs and the sex and just writing away. So that for me was a real anchor, because it allowed me that kind of cerebral, very academic, very kind of focused, sort of almost obstinate relationship with the work, and I think that kind of, I don't know, something about that physicality, the sort of hunched forward, furiously writing. Somewhere the notebook exists. I have no idea what I was writing, but I spent a lot of the film with the pencil and the pen. And the glasses, you know, weirdly the glasses really help. Like, it's odd, but what bits of costume. The height thing I can't do anything about, and Gareth was known to be shorter than I am, but I never. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't feel tall playing him, and I have done in other roles. But it's funny what the anchors are: notebooks, glasses, and suddenly they can really help.
Those are things you discover as an actor. Like, what's the last piece of the puzzle to get that character completely in your body, you know? And so it's surprising what it can be. Sometimes it's a passage you read. Sometimes it's a piece of, sometimes a prop, as you said, the notebook, or sometimes it's the costume or whatever. It kind of puts you in the right frame of mind for this. The other, I mean, you shot in 3 separate countries here. You talk about the Ukraine. Did this experience, I mean, you're still in your 30s, kind of developing your own points of view on the world, and I'm sure it's changed from when you were in your 20s. Going through this experience and this shooting this and finding out more about the Holodomor, like, has this changed your point of view on the world as well, and about history, and about how much more active you may need to be or want to be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's always a real eye-opener when you learn about the plight of a country, not just a kind of individual, but like the idea that a whole nation have this huge trauma which they still are, you know, undergo, you know, they're still kind of recovering from
and denying. Yeah.
And well, I mean, this is
but Russia, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the world, most of the international community still deny that it happened on the scale which the Ukrainians still claim, and you know, you really realize how prescient those traumas and those scars are, how relevant they are. So I think I mean, that's the beauty of acting, is that you're invited into conversations which you wouldn't otherwise be a part of. I don't think I would ever have spent the months I did learning about the Holodomor and meeting the Ukrainians and hearing their firsthand accounts from, you know, the stories their grandparents passed down to them. There's no way I would have taken the time, and now I feel emboldened and motivated to share that story on their behalf, make this movie, and continue to talk about it. Funny enough, one thing I'm really adamant about is that they kept telling me, please don't say the Ukraine, they say Ukraine, because adding the suggests that there's still Ukraine translates as, I think, the flatlands, the farmlands. And so if you say the Ukraine, it stands the farmlands of Russia. So every time I said the Ukraine, which everyone does, they would say, please don't, please, like, it's really painful for me to. And so that's one small thing which I'm able to, you know, alongside this movie and other conversations. I mean, has it changed me? I guess it just continues. I mean, you could be kind of nihilistic about it and say that every time you enter into a new job of this nature, it reveals a whole other kind of campaign, another sort of cause you need to be aware of and mobilize around. But the beauty of my job is that it doesn't feel like an effort. If once I've been there and I've met those people and I've told this story, I'm willing to be a part of that cause. And I think it's so important that we, for the sake of those Ukrainians and their families and their future, we need to recognize that this happened and hold people to account. And, you know, and you know, yeah, I mean, there's a long conversation, but I hope that it. Well,
it's called the deep cut, so we go deep. So please go ahead.
Deep cut.
I called it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, I have a newfound respect for journalists. Again, currently with the conversations around fake news and kind of the issue, particularly in America, the kind of treatment of the media right now, and this idea that, you know, journalists often carry their own ideology, and they allow that to kind of be imprinted on their reporting, and yet there are Gareths, and, you know, Gareth Jones is out there, and I hadn't often taken the time to recognize those people, and it was a real eye-opener when we were in Berlin and we had the press conference, and there were a few journalists in the audience who really were moved by the movie and came up to Agnieszka afterwards and thanked her, took her by the hand, and, you know, so there's small little incremental changes in my life, but they're fundamental ones, and I really hope that, you know, I'll carry them and continue to fight those causes for Ukraine and for journalists at large.
And that's the thing that comes back to, and this is part of your humility, I'm sure, James, but in numerous interviews you've said, like, well, my work is not as important as my sister's, or not as much, and I would have to disagree with you. I think you reach a wider audience with the roles that you choose to take and how they can affect people. And I know you've said in a previous interview, if I affect even one person to become a Gareth Jones, then I know I've done a great work. And I think that's the honest truth here, because you've said it as well, that like your pursuits, you want your work to matter as an actor. The characters you take on, you want them to matter and affect. And so I would say give yourself a break. And in my personal value, we met 30 months ago, but I would say it's pretty incredible the work you're doing and how you could be influencing people on a way larger scale. I think the work is important. So many people like watch Malcolm X and they're like, what is this? Oh, wow, I need to discover what this movement is. What was this all about? You know, so there is a chance here to the roles you take do lead to positive results and hopefully positive change in the world as well.
I mean, yeah, and then thank you for saying that, because that means a lot. And it's funny coming from I often use my sister and my family as medics and teachers as a sort of it is a nice way to deflect any you know, or I guess put my own life into perspective, because so often you see actors who do get a slightly grandiose version of their life, and you know, we are here as entertainers, and we, you know, ultimately we want to provide escapism. But I read something recently. Someone was saying, you know, the arts don't save lives, but they make life worth living. You know, and that's true. And not only that, not only do they provide reason for celebrating our existence, but they also do provide a means and a catalyst for conversations. And I do think it's important, if you can, alongside that escapism, be a catalyst and a positive force, and have some social conscience in your work. Then fantastic. I if I'm honest, recently I think I got a little burnt by, and I'm not very present. I'm not that present on social media, but occasionally I've been more present or more vocal about a certain cause which is very pertinent at that time, and the reaction I get is sometimes, and I know I shouldn't pay attention to it, but you inevitably do, and sometimes those troll voices are often louder than most of the people who are on your side, and sometimes, you know, you really get called out for using your platform in the wrong way. And you're right, like, why on earth, you know, in a way you have a responsibility right now more than ever. You know, people are desperate to get their message across, and if you have the means to contribute your voice to the right cause, and it's a difficult one. I shouldn't get burnt and I shouldn't be disheartened, but I always find that I'm tempering myself, because I know that ultimately I am an actor, not a politician. But I appreciate what you say. That's kind.
Well, I'd say you're a human being first before you're an actor, and as a human being with your own capable thoughts and your own, and certainly with a history of discussions about theology and philosophy and all of that. So that is first and foremost. The acting is what you do as your job and your career, but as a human being, you were already built with this idea to look at things in a deeper way. So I mean, I think
you're absolutely right, and of course you can't ever reply to those people who call you out. But you're right. Like, first and foremost, before I ever became an actor, I had my principles and I had my values and my moral compass, and that stood for something. Just because I occasionally will share that moral compass in a public sphere, it's not for any other reason just than to say my piece and express myself. It's funny, the people who I really am in full admiration for are people like Agnieszka, and actually you mentioned Little Women, Greta Gerwig and others, because if you can, I know I've said this in an interview before, but if you can, what I was amazed by on Little Women was that we were part of this incredibly positive contribution to the conversation around feminism and Me Too, and it never felt ever self-conscious or sanctimonious. It was always, it was inspiring generations of younger girls and boys, and in a very positive way. And I think if you can manage that, then that's what I would hopefully aspire to do with my work. But
well, it's a great thing that you bring up that movie, because I'll be honest with you, that's the only version of Little Women that I actually have ever fully enjoyed from beginning to end. And it's no knock on any of the other ones. I just felt what Greta Gerwig did with the script, going back and forth in time, really kind of making it feel topical without beating you over the head with it. I felt it was a brilliantly, philosophical way to approach the story, redeeming Amy in a way that no one has ever thought to do before. All of that, like you said, it must have been great to be in service of this piece, knowing where the piece was going, and of course being on set with all these incredible actresses and actors as well.
Amazing privilege, crazy thing for me to be a part of that film, because also by the time I was on board, they had already cast like most people. I was one of the late, as you'd expect when you see that cast, I was one of the later additions, and it was a crazy experience to be part, to be standing, because of the nature of my role. Often I was there in the group scenes, but not front and center. I was, as you say, kind of paying witness to these amazing female filmmakers and actresses. It was usually like Chris Cooper, myself, Louis Garrel, and sometimes Timothy, just standing in a row watching these amazing women.
These forces of nature, roam through.
Yeah, it was amazing. But again, like at the time, it didn't really feel like, that's the beauty of this, I guess, the story. Louise May Alcott's brilliant, beautiful piece of writing, but also Greta's interpretation of it. It never felt like we were part of a political move or a as I say, a sort of piece of a sort of self-conscious piece of overly moralistic enterprise. It always felt like we were just part of a great story, and then to have seen the number of people who have seen that movie and the response, particularly from young girls, was just so exciting. So it was joyous. I mean, I had the most amazing time. I honestly had the days on set with like Meryl and Laura Dern and Chris Cooper were just complete crazy. I took one. They brought me in a cup of tea with Meryl Streep's. I had one day with her. They brought me and Meryl a cup of tea at the same time, and they plonked on the table. And I was so excited. I took a photo because it had Meryl and James. So somewhere I've got this ridiculous photo of 2 cups of tea. But yeah, it was a very bizarre, beautiful, bonkers experience, which those whole time.
Well, you seem to gravitate to these pieces with these powerful, strong women, either in front of the camera or behind the camera. Certainly Sarah Lancashire on the Happy Valley. I mean, she's a force of nature on her own. I'm sure it must have been. It's like, if you're going to come in to get trained in what to expect when you go toe to toe with an actress like that, certainly Sarah must have been a great proving ground for yourself on that show. She
was amazing. She came from soap background, so she was in famous soap we have in this country called Coronation Street. She played Raquel, the bar lady, and she is an amazing actress. I don't know, I guess probably the same in the States. Sometimes the move from soap to acting to kind of drama, and it's totally wrong, but there is often they're seen as slightly different mediums and formats, and it's hard to make that transition. But Sarah, I mean, we would do scenes where the director would say, okay, right, let's rehearse it once, and then it would be these when Sarah and my character met, as you know, it was incredibly charged, and these big dramatic kind of beats.
Yeah.
And Sarah would be kind of chatting away and being lovely as always, and I'd be swinging my arms and kind of doing my whole drama school thing. I was really nervous, and I was aware of the sort of power of the script, and I knew that I had an opportunity here to do something special, but I didn't, I was always terrified about falling short. Sarah, again, it was her first series, so it wasn't like she had it in the bag already. She'd be chatting away, having a cup of tea, and then suddenly they call action, and she would just go 0 to 60 in seconds and be in my face. And I'd be like, Sarah, give me like a couple of takes to like warm up into this. So she was amazing. I have a lot of time and respect and love for that lady, because she's again just the real deal, as you can tell from the performance. She just
You guys have an incredible chemistry, honestly. I mean, because you're not an easy person to like in that show, and I'm not supposed to be either. But you kind of like when you're watching the show, you deliver such an interesting performance, James, that in your mind you're like, don't you dare redeem him, don't you try to redeem Tommy in my mind when you're watching it. But like you start to slowly, as a natural human being, you start to slowly move into that place. Well, maybe he could be good. He's good to his kid, and then you have those moments that when he's not good to his kid. So it's an interesting character to play. You must have been, as you said, you were nervous, but you must have been like so overwhelmed initially, and then okay, I've got to break this thing down to the smallest, and then build out from there. Is that how you approach Tommy? Because he's so different from what you seem to be naturally. Playing him as such a ruthless villain must have been a hell of a challenge.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge because I knew, as I say, I knew that there was an opportunity. I mean, I guess the challenge wasn't so much in the kind of finding the role, because Sally gave us the role. She gave us this incredible script, this incredible opportunity. The challenge was to do it justice, and knowing that there was a potential for something quite special. So I think Sally has a signature where she likes to sort of lull you into false sense of security, and you know who this person is, and then she'll kind of completely whip the rug out from underneath you, and you're left sort of going, what? I thought he was the villain, or she was the, that was the hero. And Sally loves to sort of fuck with your head in that regard. So I think that was a challenge to I guess, to sort of find the necessary, and I think I've said this many times, and I'm probably repeating myself, but find the love and the empathy for him in order to play those later scenes when your heart does go out to him. And it's a bit of a strange comparison, but I recently read Beloved, the Toni Morrison book, and the main character, again, not to give it away to those who haven't read it, but there's a thing there where the world is so horrendous that she thinks it's worth denying her kids the life that they could have. And in a weird way, Tommy is a psychopath, clinically insane, and is as a result is a very, very sad man. But at the very heart of his experience is this act of love, because he thinks that the world is such a horrible place, he doesn't want his son to live in it, and that is so beautiful and moving. And so Sally, I mean, she's just a genius. It's a very strange comparison. I hope that doesn't cause offense or anything, because it's simply just about the that particular sort of very singular singular kind of thought. But it was a joy. It was a joy to read that, have that to play, because, as you say, you go from this horrendous, the most unlikable of characters ever, raping, murdering psychopath, and then suddenly by episode 5 of that first series, even when reading it, I'm like, the same thing. I'm like, I don't want to love this man, but that's the beauty of his writing. She leaves you no choice. Yeah, I loved it. It was amazing.
People are complex, and especially in a town like that. And you're from what, North Yorkshire? Is that correct? Yeah,
I'm from North Yorkshire. Yeah, I mean, people are complex, and that's
that town, so
I do. That's what the most interesting roles, where they sit in the middle, and it's all very, it's messy and unpredictable, and I think, and that world as well is not unfamiliar to me. Those towns. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Hebden Bridge has two sides. It's a valley, and on the one side they get all the sunlight, and on the other it's in shade, because of the geography of the town. And at the very bottom they don't have any sunlight at all, and they have this thing where I think it's called valley bottom fever, where it's a kind of it's weather related. People have mental health issues relating to kind of the fact of lack of sunlight, and it's unfortunately when the gentrification happened, all the wealthy people moved to the sunny side, and the dark side had all the drugs and the crime, and it's as stark as that, and if you're born onto the dark shady side, life can be fucking hard and shitty, and for Tommy it really was. Not that I ever condones his actions, but it was far more complicated than just this stock villain. He was a victim as well.
The great shows ask that of you, and certainly Happy Valley is one of them, and certainly Tommy Lee Royce is a great character that you just kind of have to have your own personal conversation with when you're watching the movie, or the show rather, about whether you like him. I've seen some interviews where you said that it may not be done. Is that, do you know it's done? Do you think it's done, or do you think there might be another season of this, or what's your feeling on it?
I think that the intention is to do one more. I think Sally sees it as a three-part show. Yeah, I think so. I think the idea is that I know that you're right. I mean, so am I. I want to have one more go. I feel like Tommy's journey isn't quite up yet, and I think Catherine. I mean, it'll depend on Sarah and Sally, obviously, who's busier and busier every year with Gentleman Jack, and she's a very sought after writer director, understandably. So there are many variables at play, but I really hope we get to. I know that the intention was to let Reese, who plays Ryan, the younger boy, Tommy's son, to allow him to get a little older, and when he's a bit older, he can then access Tommy on his own terms, rather than if he's a bit maybe a teenager. So I think that what we might do is jump in when he is already. Reese is probably now 15, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait. I heard there are always noises, rumors. Sure. I can't vouch for how significant they are quite yet.
I mean, the idea it must excite you too, because you've had some years now acting in multiple other projects and developing your craft even more. Like you said, you want one more shot at Tommy. It would be interesting to see the James Norton now taking on the Tommy Lee Royce character, how much more levels you could give to the character depending on the situation, and especially if Reese is older, what those interactions would be like, to kind of decorate Tommy a little bit more and get to see other sides of him and other layers of him as well. Because Tommy would be older, having been in prison. What are those experiences like? How has that changed him as well? Maybe he ends up on Sarah Lancashire's side on this whole thing, which would be even more insane.
Can you imagine? Sally really pulls the rug under, and they end up having some weird relationship. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Is it getting a little dark in here? Am I okay? Do you want to put a light on? Or are you good?
You can. I can still see.
I've got one right here. Let's see what this does. Maybe that'll help a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
Let's do it.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's an interesting thing. I think it's, everyone takes part their own life, and that's your fuel. That's your reference point, I guess, for your characters. But the risk is, I think, more. I mean, my understanding of Tommy is there. We did a lot of work with the criminal psychologists and Sally and Sarah, and it's the risk is that you get too aware of the success of the show, I think. I mean, it'd be interesting to I guess like Boyhood and those other films which have kind of spanned 15 years are different because it's more similar to a show which has kind of popped, like Succession. Not that we've popped in the same way that Succession has, but now that I'm aware of the love for the show and the love for Tommy, I hope that you don't get cocky. I think that would be the risk, that you start to kind of I don't know, indulge ever so often. There's nothing worse than seeing an actor enjoy themselves too much. I hate indulgent performances. So, but I know also that Sally would never let that happen. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Maybe they bring Agnieszka to direct a couple of the episodes. She's done TV before. She's done The Wire and other things. So it's certainly.
Yeah.
Do you think we're in a golden age of British actors, James? I feel like we're back into another golden age. There's so many incredible actors that are crossing over from multiple countries in the UK that are getting notoriety in the United States and in their own homelands. Do you sense that, or is this just like the standard stuff and you're just another part of the next generation?
Wow, I mean, that's a good question. I even hope so. It would be lovely to think that. Yeah, I guess there's something about the British sensibility which exports well, and it lends itself to cinema, and I guess theatre as well. But I think particularly cinema, because I think, you know, one of my most influential directors very early on, and actually it was a play where he really, it was my second job out of drama school, and a guy called Richard Wilson, who's actually famous again for being on a sitcom here, One Foot in the Grave. If you asked any British person over the age of 30, they know exactly who he is. He's got this amazing catchphrase. But he taught me to trust the eyes. Even in a piece of theatre where I was having to kind of communicate with the back of the audience, he was the one who said, stop showing us, stop frowning, stop making every emotion manifest, just trust it. And then taking that from theatre into film, and trusting the camera to, as you say, find the truth behind the eyes. Yeah. Obviously, it's not. I'm not claiming that as a British thing. It's definitely not. But certainly, we as a species, as a kind of country, I think we are a little more repressed, and we don't necessarily lend ourselves to big demonstrative emotion. So when it comes to film, I guess if I was to hazard a guess, there is something about the kind of communication of emotion when it is more kind of contained, which personally I love watching. I love actors who leave you guessing, and I don't necessarily want to be told all the answers straight away. And not that American or any other nation does that, but certainly British people, I think, because we're so goddamn repressed. You know, we just keep it all in, and people love that on film. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'd love that if there was a golden age of British actors. There are an incredible number of fantastic actors coming out of Australia, like Mia Wasikowska, and you know, America, obviously, one of my favorite actors. So it's a happy family right now, a big melting pot. But as long as us Brits are being represented, I'm happy.
Yeah, you are. I mean, you got Lily James coming over, who you've worked with. You got, Carey Mulligan has already implanted herself. Idris Elba. There's so many. And maybe I'm a little biased, because as I said, my girlfriend's an Anglophile. We watch a lot of stuff on Acorn TV, BritBox here in the States that I would never have seen before. Even Welsh. We're watching Welsh dramas now, which I would have never seen before. But there's so many great actors that I see across the UK in these shows showing up. And Martin Freeman just did one that's based on a true story about the young girls that were kidnapped and killed, and how he had to defend himself. Like, all those, you see so much good. I feel like we're seeing so much good TV and films and actors coming out of Britain now. It just feels like a golden age. And I get so excited when I stumble upon a new show, or we stumble upon a new show. It's like, okay, who can we discover here? Who are the new actors we're going to get exposed to here? And that's how I discovered you. And so when they said this was a possibility, I was like, please, yes, whatever needs to happen. I know.
Amazing. I love your girlfriend. I love her taste. It's fantastic. We need many Anglophiles as we possibly can. Yeah, it's very exciting. It's also very exciting. I love when I see those actors who sort of slip under the net, like the Matthew Rhys's of this world, who he was Americans for years, and he's a Welsh. I mean, I did my first ever TV show with him back in the day, and he's a Welsh. They come. I mean, I remember we're doing that film with that TV show, and he was on like property porn, looking at Welsh farmhouses, desperate to move back to his homeland, and now he's in America, and he's a child. And he's this big show, and I don't think anyone even knows that he's from Wales. So it's a cool. But more and more, the kind of cross pollination of our respective industries. I mean, I love my girlfriend has been in New York for many years, and I love going over there. And the more I've worked more and more, as you said earlier, on a couple of sort of bigger studio movies. For us Brits, there is something kind of magnificent about Hollywood. It's undeniable, the sacredness. Okay. I think so. I mean, it's not just the sort of scale and size, although that is exciting. But you guys, there is, as I say, it's a sacred space, and I feel often as a Brit we're kind of aware of our little piece of our contribution, which is probably far, way out of proportion for what it should be, considering the size of our country. But the storytellers, the writers, the filmmakers over there are formidable. Yeah,
it's so funny because we're in reverse. Like we live here in Los Angeles for like 20 years, and yet we look at Britain and we're like, oh, this is where it's happening. This is where we want. This is the entertainment we want to have, because the big stuff. So it's funny to see the reverse there. But it's also like the way you're raised, right? Over there is so much more interesting. What's going on there? What's there? So
totally.
That's part of it.
Yeah, and we do. I guess there's also something about the kind of exotic other world. The last shows I've watched have been all American. I mean, Homecoming. I watched Mrs. Fletcher. I love Mrs. Fletcher, which was so good, and Catherine Harness was so good in that. And we do occasionally watch British TV, but I guess there's something about, again, going back to that escapism. And I think probably if your girlfriend's an Anglophile, mine and I'm, she's certainly in. What's the opposite? What's an American file? What's
sure.
That was the Americana dream. So yeah. I mean, we can mention real quick if it's not an offensive thing to say. Your girlfriend is Imogen Poots. Am I correct on that? And I missed out interviewing her for the Black Christmas junket. I only got to interview the director and the writer. My time didn't quite line up, and I missed out on interviewing her. She's done so many things. She's worked with so many interesting directors, like Terrence Malick in Knight of Cups, and then of course recently, like I said, Black Christmas, but Jane Eyre. She's done so many things and shown up some interesting projects. But you guys she's talked about how this long distance relationship. Is there a possibility down the road that you two do like a romantic comedy? Because you've also talked about the fact that no one offers you comedy roles, and maybe this is a way to have you guys spend more time together and finally you can do some comedy. I'll suggest it to her. I've got a feeling she's going to tell me to do one, but it'd be quite funny to see what her reaction would be. We did a play. We met doing a play, and it certainly wasn't a romantic comedy. It was a play by Amy Herzog called Belleville, which we did at the Dolmar, and it's the complete opposite of a romantic comedy. It's a complete existential crisis of a young couple who kind of fall apart. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny going out with someone in your business. I mean, we love talking about our work, but it doesn't. It's not all we talk about, thank goodness. But it's nice to have someone who understands the madness and understands it from the inside. And I learn. I have an amazing amount of respect for her and her craft and her journey. She's been doing it for a lot longer than me, and she's constantly giving me advice and reassurance. I hope I give her some, but. The long distance thing as well. I mean, this mad job which we do is there are wonderful gains, and you get to travel almost, unless there's a pandemic on, but travel, meet amazing people, and embark in these worlds, these people, these kind of like the whole Ukraine, spending time in northern Ukraine and Kiev. Those are privileges, but the cost is that you holding down, not holding down relationships, but giving them their sort of their due time and attention, and it can be a challenge. So if you're with someone who's also in the same boat, I guess it's a little bit more forgiveness.
Yeah, the upkeep is a little bit more. Yeah, right. It's more extensive, but there is more space as well in there. We talked about, you just mentioned Hollywood. I was like, I got to ask you this. Do you have like a chocolate drawer? And by that, I mean, like, do you have a guilty pleasure? Like, would you want to be in superhero movies? Or do you see Jason Statham in like Hobbs and Shaw and you're like, oh man, I'd like to get into Fast and Furious. Like, do you have a chocolate drawer for you, guilty pleasure genres you'd love to have a shot at? Or are you more about like, I want to do important stuff, blah, blah, blah?
I love you. I actually have a chocolate drawer, which is right there. And I was like, is he going to ask me to open my chocolate drawer? Does he want to? I love chocolate, and I happen to have a drawer full of dark chocolate. But that's not what you mean. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I'm not that interested in, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to have a go at everything, and it would be, I'm not going to say no to something I've never experienced, because that would be short-sighted of me. I mean, how can you don't want to visit a country or until you've actually experienced it for yourself? And I think in a similar way, there's the various genres of movies and the kind of huge tapestry of movie making. It's so varied, and I'm not sure what it is to be on a Marvel movie. So I'm not going to say that I wouldn't want to do it. I think probably like. I don't know, my chocolate drawer, what would it be? I guess maybe like a
guilty pleasure movie that you'd like pull out and like, or that you stumble upon and you'll enjoy.
I'd love to do some old like an 80s, old 80s kind of rom-com vibe, I guess. Like that would be, we you know, what did we watch recently? Heartburn. You know, that kind of the Fatal Attraction kind of, you know, those. That's not a rom-com, but I guess
no, maybe for Tom Cruise that's a rom-com, but not for
rom-com. But I guess I did say it recently, but comedy. I mean, I would love. I did a lot of comedy when I was at university, and there was a moment when they actually, I was invited if I want to become a member of the Footlights, which is the kind of the troupe which would let, you know, gave rise to Monty Python and met a crazy number of incredible. Not that I was ever going to be, you know, on that kind of caliber, but I do remember that deciding not to become a member because I wanted to focus on drama, and I wonder if I had, would I have done a bit more comedy? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I even have the comedy bones, but I would love to try. I think. You know, one of those big kind of glitzy studio comedies with I guess, but I don't know if I have it in me. Who knows?
Do you have a favorite movie? Do you have a movie that you go back to that you enjoy the most, or do you have a performance that like really influenced you to become an actor?
Wow, that's interesting. Do I have my family were definitely not cinephiles, so the movies we were watching as kids were you know. My sister watched The Sound of Music on repeat over and over again, and I would often be forced to watch that. My own kind of childhood movies were, you know, probably similar. A movie. I find that question very hard to answer. What's your favorite movie, or what is it? You know, the movie which kind of means the most to you. A movie, or at least a movie which recently has really stayed with me and I returned to, was Into the Wild, and I think maybe that's because of the kind of subject matter, and I'm a country boy at heart, and there's something about the mystique and magic, and you know, it's about that life. But for some reason, recently that they lifted the bus out of Chris McCall. Yeah, they decided that it wasn't safe because people kind of were going on these pilgrimages, and then after we went and watched Tracks, you know, the Mia film. Have you seen that movie where she crosses the Australian outback? And so I it's just something about the age I'm at, but right now I'm definitely gravitating towards movies which really test the kind of human spirit to the max. But I don't know, interesting. No, basically, as far as I can tell, there isn't the one which I return to. I've never, oddly, and I often talk about this to Imogen, I've never been one of those people who like is a mad fan. Like I've never, for example, had like bands, music artists. I love music. I love putting together Spotify the playlists and mixtapes, and there'll always be music playing somewhere in the house.
Right.
Love going and dancing and playing. I used to play various instruments, but I've never, for example, like been the avid sort of must see that person, buy everything they've done. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I'm just a little non-committal, but it's similarly with movies. It's not like I've kind of watched one movie over and over again, and I know that lots of people have, but I guess I'm a little bit more. I spread myself thinly, I guess, across the whole.
It sounds like you're a traveler. Like you like to visit and then move on to the next experience.
Yeah, it's true.
You view it.
Which drives people mad because some, like, you know, Innie, for example, loves to like find the restaurant she loves and go back to it, and I'm like, why? Let's go to the other one. So yeah, maybe that's why we work. But it's true. I'm definitely a nomad, and I don't settle, and if I go on holiday to a place which I loved, I don't want to go back. I'll go to the next place. So yeah.
Let me ask you about this, especially because of what you just said. And look, I know you've answered the question 5 million freaking times on all these other podcasts and shows, but I got to ask, or I'd be fired from what I do. I'd fire myself from what I do. But you talk about this, the nomad nature of it all. You talk about how you experience, like you just mentioned now, and there's all kinds of rumors about Bond and the possibility here. Let's move away from the fact that you've been offered it or anything like that. Because I know recently you kind of, there was a big deal. Oh, he revealed that his agent and him have talked about it. But like, is there a fear of walking into a role like this because of your nomadic nature, that you'd feel trapped by it and you'd have to do a number of movies? Or is there any, because everyone wants to ask you if you've been offered it. I want to ask you, would you want to do it? Like, built just from my experience with you over the last hour, would this unsettle you?
It's a very good question. It's very hard to answer. It's very hard to answer because whatever I say often kind of can be misconstrued.
Well, it's just between you and me. It's just between you and me.
No one's going to watch this anyway. It's totally fine. He didn't tell me that. I thought this was meant to go. It's difficult. I mean, there is this. It's such a prestigious kind of, it carries sort of such weight and tradition, and so there's something kind of under, it would be the kind of, it would be, it's obviously, I think with any of those types of roles there is obviously an unknown, and I think if I were ever to embark on a role of that nature, the challenge would be to make sure that it was always growing, moving forward, progressing. And I think right now certain franchises, not that one necessarily, but certain ones are having to kind of contend with accusations that they're becoming a little staid or whatever. And I think the challenge on something like that role would be to make sure that it felt relevant and continue to be relevant. And that would be a challenge, I hope, which would keep you moving forward and growing and learning as an actor. But yeah, I mean, I guess any kind of franchise. I recently signed a contract with HBO on a Joss Whedon show, which is the first sort of thing that's the first type of contract I've signed of that type, where you're in it potentially, if it's successful, you're in it for a few series. And so, and always is there going to be a little part of you, a little trepidation where you're like, is this going to be one job for,
right.
I mean, you see me bouncing around this.
You're doing a great job. It's a fantastic.
I can keep going as well. Yeah, I don't know. I would hope personally, and this is my thing, I would hope that personally, I love Daniel Craig, and I would like him to do as many as he can. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I had to ask her. I'd get in trouble with this.
Sorry, I had to answer in that way. It's you have to be.
No, well, I'm cheering for you, and I think if you do get it, it would probably blow your mind. As a country boy from Yorkshire, getting to play such an iconic character would be an incredible achievement, and a massive vote of confidence from those people about who you are as an actor. And maybe if you do take it on, maybe your Bond has a little more of a social bent to it, like social issues bent to it, or social justice bent, as you said.
I mean, it would be nice. As I said to you, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so right. That would be an interesting angle to have Bond.
Diabetic, wow, that'd be good.
Diabetic Bond, exactly. We could have some funky thing with his injection, which is like turned into some like.
Hold on, Blofeld. All right.
Yeah, I love it. The type 1 community would be over the moon. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, as my dad who had diabetes and struggled with it for quite some time, I'm very moved by the fact that you're open about it. You've done talks about it. You've been on, done extensive conversations about it, and you never shy away from it. And you've said in one of your quotes in an interview, like sometimes you're injecting up to 15 times a day, and you're just showing that if I can function, you can function. And I think you might not have as much weight with this as you think, but I think people see that and are influenced by that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Going back to what you were saying earlier about how much of a responsibility an actor has to, use their platform and in a kind of political sphere. What's wonderful, what's lovely about. I never intended to talk about my debut. I was always going to talk about it at some point, but then it kind of got sprung on me accidentally in a talk show, and I was suddenly there. I was talking about it, and then as the media in the UK found out from the talk show, and they called me up the day after and said, "We're going to run this story." I was like, "Okay, fine." So it was kind of done for me, which was great, because ever since then, the reaction I've had from from other diabetics, and particularly like parents of young diabetics, has been so moving, and that's so authentic and organic. And there's no one can accuse me of virtue signaling because it's my condition and I live with it. And every time I meet a fellow diabetic, particularly if they're a young, recently diagnosed diabetic, nothing I love more than just kind of instilling them with a confidence and self-belief, because it can knock you, but it doesn't knock you down. Like lots of people have something which they contend with, and mine is diabetes, but it's never stopped me doing anything, and it's opened my eyes to other people and their conditions. And I say that the response I get from other people in that community and the parents is just kids who see an actor going out and doing what they love and it not hampering them. I can safely say, without any kind of as I say, virtue signaling, I'm very proud of that. And I'm also lucky because I'm from my sister and my mum are both type 1 diabetics, so it's been in my life forever, and I'm very kind of accustomed to it. So but thanks.
I know we're over the hour mark. Can I have time for 2 more questions, or do you have to get?
Of course, I've got nowhere to be. It's
it must be kind of mind blowing when you look at the fact that you kind of burst onto the film scene with An Education, which had Peter Sarsgaard in it, and here you are in this movie again with Peter Sarsgaard and his naked behind. This must be like, did you guys have conversations on the set of how your journey has been to end up back in another movie with Peter, but this time playing opposite him as a lead?
Do you know what? One second, I was going to put the light up because it is getting up. Oh no, it's not really helped at all. My crappy bulb is still as low as it was. Do you know what? So the funny thing about An Education was I was never meant to do that movie. I was at drama school at the time, and a casting director who I now know and love very well. She's amazing. She really helped me out, and she kind of did it as a favor. Yeah. Didn't tell anyone at the school, because basically it was just me cycling past the camera at the end. And I did have a scene where Peter was in it. Peter and Carrie were like having this final kind of showdown, and I'm off camera. All that they had to do, all it had in the script was Peter looked towards my direction as Jenny's new boyfriend, and I had to wave. And I've said this in a few interviews, but I remember sitting in the trailer beforehand practicing my wave like multiple times in the mirror. I was so nervous. So I did wave at Peter. But the bastard forgot. He totally didn't remember. I'm like, well, obviously the first thing I did was go to that, Peter, it's so nice to see you again. And he had no clue. And actually, in the end, the scene was cut. I think Peter wasn't even in that scene. Right. And all you see is me just like cycling past camera, looking utterly terrified, trying to stay on this period bike with Carrie. So obviously, I'm very flattered that you said, burst on the scene through An Education, but I definitely was like, I sort of limped on with my crappy bike. But it was
someone's eye because you kept working afterwards. So yeah,
exactly. I owe everything to that performance. It was actually really lovely to work with Peter and come full circle. Kind of, I mean, even though he couldn't remember, because obviously he was there in that role. I was, very aware of him as an actor as a result of that, and because he's Peter Sarsgaard, and so I guess in the sense it was like a gentle marker, which was an undeniable kind of, you spend a lot of time kind of going, I'm still, and I think it's probably healthy to still feel like you're starting out and you're still like learning the craft, and you're very much kind of at the beginning, and then you find that suddenly some kid comes on set and they ask you for some advice as if you're like a sort of learned elder, and you're like, I'm still a kid, like don't treat me like a, but I guess in an undeniable way, it was when Peter and I did that film together, Mr. Jones, I couldn't deny that 12, 14 years or something had passed, and here I was in this wonderful dynamic acting with him as a scene partner. So in that sense, I would quietly have a moment of sort of pause and pride, I guess, at that. And he's a wonderful person to have that with, because he's just the coolest dude. He's such a nice guy, and he's a proper sort of, he is as far as the proper artist. He is a real man of integrity and very creative and sensitive, and very, very intelligent. So it was lovely. It was lovely. But as I say, despite my extraordinary waving, he so.
How is Vanessa? I mean, she's on the ascendancy here. She's obviously done the franchise film with Hobbs and Shaw, but also off of The Crown, and she's got a couple of things coming up here. Like, what was it like to be working with her?
Yeah, so Vanessa and I have pals from of old, really. Like she and I, we met when we were at drama school, and we've not actually worked properly together before Mr. Jones, but we did a strange kind of campaign thing, and we've been to many festivals and parties and things. We've kind of been, in the same room many times. So it was kind of like an old friend, turning up on set, and it was lovely in that regard. We were able to sort of trust each other from the moment we started. And it's great to see, she's a sweet, she's a good friend. She's a sweet lady and so talented. And as you say, is on the ascendancy. And I think that's only... I couldn't be happier for her, and she's deserving of it totally. But I think she also obviously doesn't just want to do Mission Impossible. She also wants to come and it wasn't the lead role in Mr. Jones. It was it was and she didn't have to come and do it. Her career certainly did not need it. And so I take my hat off to her that she came and she gave it everything, and she rewrote that character. I mean,
really?
that role was there, but it was one of the roles which was created from nothing, and she had a huge part to play in the kind of carving out of Ada. Her whole her whole ideology of leaning in towards the sort of Soviet experiment was actually kind of came from Vanessa. Initially, Ada was very, very cynical of it and was much more on Gareth's side from the beginning. So that was testament to her, as an actress and as a filmmaker in general. And I think that she's aspirations to maybe make movies herself. So yeah, no, I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah, that scene you guys have, where she doesn't want to kiss you before you head off to the Ukraine because she's doesn't want to feel connected to you because of what had just happened to Paul, the other journalist, Paul. I mean, that scene is incredible. I mean, it's so out of the blue in terms of the rhythm of the movie, and not in a negative way, more of a like, oh, wow, this is how deep it goes. Because as you said, she's, as you say about British people, repressed. She's repressed in that moment because she does not want to connect to somebody who might experience the same things she just saw a good friend of hers experience, or an impossible love interest. I don't know if that's explored too much, but certainly it feels that way. And so that moment when you're trying to connect with her on a human level as the character of Gareth, it's incredible. It's incredible, man.
I'm so pleased because I couldn't agree more. And actually, if I'm honest, that didn't exist in the script.
No.
I think it would originally was a more. I mean, it was always a complicated moment, and it was always jarring. And I don't think Andrea ever, or Agnieszka certainly, ever wanted it to kind of be a sort of predictable love story. The film was always always had more depth and credibility than that. But Vanessa, I think originally it was more of a kind of like a kiss, like a more of a traditional goodbye kiss, and a sort of hint at a relationship which may or may not, that may have happened had things been different. And she spoke to me about it, and I totally agreed. And we then had a long sort of workshop with Agnieszka on that scene, and we all decided, and a lot largely down to Vanessa and her kind of her opinion. We decided that we weren't going to give the audience any kind of traditional sort of goodbye kiss. Right. We wanted Ada to fight that, and actually then it became this physical struggle, and she's like pushing him away, and he's sort of pushing himself on her, and that's in itself kind of a question. It was great. It was really exciting because it was really weird, and it felt like it was jarring in the moment. And we did all different versions of it. We had more submissive from Gareth and submissive from her, and less violent, more violent, and obviously Agnieszka in the end, and the producers, they have the final cut, but we definitely gave them a lot of options, and it was very cool, very exciting. It's great when you've got an actress like Vanessa, and you trust her, and you can just play,
Right. Well, it also gives a nice little layer to Gareth, because Gareth will, for better or worse, he will get what he thinks is right in whatever moment he's in, and in that moment he thinks it's right to break through her walls and connect with her, to show her that a human connection is still possible, and that he thinks he's going to be safe. And ultimately he was out of that experience, but then of course eventually was not, but out of that experience he was. So he was trying to assure her that he was going to be fine.
Totally. And then of course the final scene when she sends him the orange, and the wonderful full circle of their relationship, and then the tragedy of him walking off with that orange, throwing it in the air, and that was him, obviously unbeknownst to him, but him walking to his death in Mongolia. So it was great. That the fact that whole sort of that was an artistic license we took to create that dynamic, but it really fit beautifully. And again, as I say, testament to Vanessa, who's just, again, the real deal, proper.
Absolutely. One last question before it goes completely dark on you in there.
I'm leaning further into the camera because it's what is it, 9:20 in the UK, and although the solstice has happened, it's I apologize. You can still see me, can you?
Yeah, I can see your face. Yeah, nothing else I can see, but I can see your face.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No. One last question. That you mentioned the HBO show, that you're doing this with Joss Whedon. You guys had to stop it seems like halfway through the production because of the pandemic and the coronavirus situation. What is your, like right now at the midway point of the shoot, what is your feeling about working with Joss? What has been this experience like? Are you ready to speak about it fully yet, or is it still kind of germinating in your mind because there's still more to go here?
A bit of both. I mean, I'm very aware of his genius now, and I'm very lucky to have had the months we had. Well, actually, we shot the pilot in August, then we had a hiatus, and then we picked up sort of late last year and shot through into just before the lockdown, so into March. So I've had enough time on Joss's set and in his mind and his peculiarities to really experience his kind of the extraordinary side to his mind. Joss Whedon is, it's just, again, I sort of feel like I'm using these kind of big sweeping statements when it comes to Agnieszka and Joss, but he really is like completely bizarre and wonderful and so intelligent. And so, like pure creativity, he just, this world he's created is entirely from his own head, and there's no source materials, no books, no kind of live act, no comic book or anything. It just keeps going and going. And I think I've got a grasp on it. I mean, there's a lot I still don't have a grasp on. That we're, as I say, we're halfway through, so a lot of it is still to be answered, and some of it we actually don't even know where we're ending up. I trust him. I admire him. I'm very excited to see where we are going to go with this journey. I'm reassured that HBO are going to see it through, because obviously I know that, nothing is guaranteed right now, and I think we're very lucky. We're one of the lucky ones, and I think we are going to continue, and we're waiting for the sort of date, waiting for that green light. But without giving anything away, because I'm obviously not allowed to, but he's just like mad. I mean, I said this again in interviews. He's so self-deprecating and so humble, and yet he has such power. His mind is so powerful. It's like this vibrating kind of source of energy. And on set as well, he's Joss. This is a Joss Whedon project. Right. Everything most stuff goes through him. You meet him, and he's like so humble and just softly spoken and decent. Very, very kind of kind. So I'm a big fan.
Big fan. We need more of those people in charge of projects. all around entertainment. So shout out to that. I won't ask you about Hugo Swan too much because, like I said, you're still in the middle of doing this and shooting this and creating this. So hopefully down the road, if I am lucky enough and tapped by HBO to do the junket for my own channel, I'll get a chance to. I would love to do that. That'd
be great, and I will remember to switch the lights on and not play tennis just beforehand. So I'm perspiring, which I did recently in another interview. My publicist team would be despairing of me.
You came in with the endorphins from the tennis, so I had you fully open, man. I love it. I love it.
I did. Wish I'd switched my lights on.
Thank you, James, definitely. So much for the time, man. Almost an hour and 20 minutes, and I can't thank you enough for taking that time, your own personal time, to hang out with me and hang out with our viewers and our listeners, because I will put this also in podcast form as well as on camera form for people to enjoy. So thank you so much. As I said at the top of the show, Mr. Jones, it is available now for you on digital, and it'll be on demand on July 3rd. This is a fantastic and important movie that you got to watch, and if for no other reason, watch it for James Norton's performance as Gareth Jones. But really, the film works on multiple levels. And hey, Agnieszka is a multi-Academy Award-winning nominated director, so you're in good hands there when you're watching the movie. Thank you, James, for the time, man.
John, thank you very much. See you again soon. Yeah, thank you. That was a real pleasure.
Thank you. Me too. I'm going to drop you out, and feel free to go on with the rest of your night. Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to meet you. Take care. Likewise. See you soon. Bye-bye. Well, there you go. That was James Norton hanging out with us for a little bit on the deep cut. I can't thank him enough. He just finished playing tennis, and so he was like a little sweaty. He didn't know that this was going to be an on-camera one, so we adjusted it to make it go in that direction. And he was fantastic to take the time, and it was my honor to sit with him. One of my favorite actors working right now, and no matter what project he takes on, TV or film. And so it was a joy to explore that more with him. So, and for those of you who are watching and he went a little darker in terms of the background, I hope you still enjoyed watching it on camera. And for those of you who are listening to it on the podcast, thank you so much for downloading this episode on the Outlaw Nation Podcast Network. All right, I'm going to end the show like I end every show. Whatever you need to do to get through the next second, next minute, next hour, next day, next week, next month, next year, I encourage you to do it. Because you never know what's waiting for you on the other side. I've been through the dark times and climbed out. Part of the reason why I do the deep cut is so you can get to meet people and enjoy people and hear their stories as well, and how far they've come in their lives and in their worlds, and what they've overcome or what obstacles they've encountered and still survived and still achieved things. So hopefully this episode has given you some motivation for your life, as well as some inspiration for your life, because I like to see you on the other side. All right, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new episode of The Deep Cut here on the Outlaw Nation. Take care.